Howdy, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems, the podcast where we tackle the leadership challenges that no one wants to talk about, but every business faces. I'm your host, Mel Ortiz with Activate Human Capital Group. Today's conversation is with Brandon Miller of 34 Strong. You'll hear more about his background as we get into the episode, but what stands out most is the shared focus we both have on identifying and leveraging the strengths already inside your organization, that untapped potential that just needs to be named, claimed, and intentionally aimed. In the conversation, we talk about how leaders often overlook the strengths sitting on their current teams, why the solution you're searching for externally may already exist internally and how to go looking for it, and how to use structured tools and assessments to objectively evaluate your people and align them to the right roles where they can thrive. So let's get to it. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems. I am Mel Ortiz, and I am super jazzed to have Brandon Miller with me today from 34 Strong. We have been talking on so many different topics. We've been connected for a long time, but really been talking for what, Brandon, the last 18 months or so about how do we do what we do better together. And so I'd love for you to introduce yourself and kind of where you see some of our activities heading before we jump into our discussion around the hidden cost of underutilized strengths in the workplace.
Absolutely.
So,
Happy to do that. Brandon Miller, founding CEO of a company called 34 Strong. And we love to go into workplaces that have people problems, and we like to help solve them and create what can be referred to as employers of choice, um, recognized and awarded great places to work, just generally positive and uplifting workplace cultures. And so we use a variety of tools to do that. We're very focused on a strengths-based approach to development. We think employee engagement is the primary way you have to measure against any outcome you're looking for, because I like to call it the mother of all indicators. If you have employee engagement headed in the right direction, almost everything else you care about will cascade under that. And so it has been to us a very natural alliance with Mel and what she has with Activate. And we're excited for our partnership and excited to be here today.
good deal. So, if you don't know me, if you're listening because you know Brandon and you don't know me, my jam is employee engagement, getting the right people in the right seats and helping them thrive. And we both believe very strongly in a strengths-based approach and taking the raw material we already have to work with and making something wonderful out of it. So, that alignment has been fun. In addition to the Strengths Finder and an employee engagement tool, we use Predictive Index as a pre-hire assessment since the Gallup Strengths Finder is not intended for that. I hope that's not new news to you that are strengths fans. But I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, Brandon. You talk so much about individual strengths, strengths collectively, and I wanted to have our conversation really focused today on how it shows up, how underutilized strengths at work really show up, what the cost is, how do we start to isolate those issues and address them? Because from what I've seen, it's not just the organization that benefits, it's the individual and their people at home and their community and the extra energy they have to make a better impact on the world when they are not underutilizing their strengths because they have a chance to shine in their role. So when I say the phrase underutilized strengths, what does that actually look like from what you see inside of organizations?
Sure, untapped potential. I think when we hire someone to come in and do a job, we'd love for them to bring the full complement of who they are, their experience, their knowledge, their skills, their education, and their innate talents, what it is that they naturally do better than many others. And sometimes in the workplace, when we don't connect these dots, we'll have people fulfill a role, they'll do a job, they'll do a function, but it's a great question to ask. What are we leaving on the table? What's the and? What is it that is offered? And it's fantastic when employers, leaders, people managers discover, oh my goodness, I have this wealth of amazing ability here that I just needed to ask, uncover, create the right circumstances for those things to emerge. And so what we do in our respective environments with our customers is we do help them maximize resources that they probably have already significantly invested in. And to leave that dormant or lie unstill, it's not only a loss for the employer, you have this employee that can peak perform in areas that, if given the opportunity, if given the space to range and move, could really enhance their growth and their role.
It's shocking to me when you look at both strengths and engagement together, because engagement to me is about discretionary effort. It's I'm doing more than the bare minimum that I get paid to do. I'm bringing more ideas, better processes, new concepts to the table, and doing it in a way that's all in versus I'm checking the boxes, I'm responding to emails, I'm doing enough to not get fired,
Mm,
really. And I just that underutilized strengths. I think so often as individuals in the workplace, we don't know what we're capable of. Our supervisors, they sure don't know. And so much of it is trial and error, right? It's first finding a language. And we've talked a lot. We both love StrengthsFinder, but we're a little bit agnostic. If there's a tool that you love, if it's Predictive Index, if it's Myers-Briggs, if it's the Berkman, there are a lot of good assessments out there. Find one you like and use it. Learn the language, make it a thing in the way that you communicate. And that to me is often the little bit of a little seed that gets planted. So we start to understand how to call upon those strengths, however we're defining them, and how they might get in our way, right?
mhm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we think about, and I agree with you, we're assessment agnostic in terms of what works inside of a culture to get the best outcomes. And what we do favor is peak performance, people that can absolutely perform individually and perform as a collective unit, whatever the team environment looks like. And we're very much in favor of working with people leaders to be the best boss they can be, to be challenged to be the best boss someone's ever had. And part of that would include really get to know your people, really understand them, really understand where they're coming from, where they thrive, where they have the greatest energy release, where they feel the most impact from their work, the interflow. And people leaders that learn to do that without a threat, right? Your success is our success. You shining is us shining, and giving space for that to be, that's who we are. Is we are a culture, we are a team, we are a organization, or a unit within an organization. That's how we want to function, because as we know, it's not just that the work thrives. What happens is we have human flourishing, that we get to flourish in our lives, in our relationships, in our communities, our friendships, our schools, our children. And so that's a big part of the mission side of what we get to do. Is we're not just building workplaces to be great because we want people to make a lot of money or fulfill their organization's mission as part of maybe a public sector agency, but really to challenge status quo as it relates to all of our collective experiences with work.
I have this mantra, and I think it applies. You're talking about being a great boss. I think it applies to every employee in the workplace. And my mantra is nobody wants to suck at work.
Yeah,
Nobody shows up every day thinking, I'm going to be really mediocre today.
yeah.
And so much of that is learning the language. I was leading a session last week for a client, and a gentleman came up to me, one of the leadership team members, and he said, you talk a lot about your talents about being assertive and direct, and how that didn't play well for you as a kid. I was told, girl, I have activator and command. I was told I was bossy and impatient. Those were the cross I carried, the shame that I carried with me. And it really wasn't until I took the Strengths Finder that I realized there was any positive to those. And he said, my daughter, I think, has a lot of similar talents to you. And I wish I could help her through the stage she's at. She's 27 years old. She's pursuing an advanced degree. Her friends aren't the best at shining a light on who she is. They kind of try to quell her down. Her workplace isn't going well either. And he had tears in his eyes. And I'm like, I feel her. I feel her so strongly. And that's, what we're talking about is then this person goes home every day feeling like they're less rather than shining. And I think I was thinking about it while I was brushing my teeth yesterday. We talk a lot about time management in the workplace. We do not talk enough about energy management. And your energy comes when you're not underutilizing your strengths. You're being
Mm.
called upon for the best within you. And I think that's why this is such an eternal wellspring of interest for me. because it matters to so many people.
It
All the
does. I
people.
mean, when we think about how at least two-thirds of the workforce, they don't look forward to work. They don't want to be there. Work
They
isn't,
have to go to work.
yeah, it's necessary. And I respect that you got to make a living, you got to pay your bills. And if that's life, it's life, right? There's a lot of examples of that in a space and time where jobs can do better and be better. We really can take the extra minutes to figure out who we're working with to uncover what you just said. It's not just performance, right? It's personality. It's understanding differences. It's respecting differences. It's realizing that, as we both know and preach often, if you don't know what's expected of you at work, you're going to be frustrated. And if you're a people leader and you don't know how to establish that for your people, you're both going to be frustrated. Well, part of the ability to have that conversation is I have to know you. I need to know some things about you that help me to interpret you and help you to interpret me. So when we're doing this all important exchange of here's what we need to have done by this time in this way, we're both talking in a language that we can fall back to and respect. And psychometric assessments are great for this. But what's even better is realizing when we're not in alignment because our Activate employee engagement assessment told us, oh, a lot of you are having trouble knowing what you need to do around here and having the right stuff to do it. And you don't feel like you're in a job that utilizes your strengths. You don't feel like you're in a job that positions you to do what you do best. How about we learn to do that better? How about we collectively, you as team member, me as team leader, to do that better? Wow, talk about a shift, right? Not just in workplace, but Sunday night becomes not scary. It becomes, I'm looking forward to the day. I got this tomorrow. I got that. I'm looking forward to Wednesday. I got my week lined down. Before you know it, we're back to Friday planning a weekend.
It's interesting you say that, as I what came to mind as you were saying that was it takes this opportunity for us to go instead of an adversarial boss employee relationship, it gives us some data to look at shoulder to shoulder, look at the data and say, okay, what does this mean? What do we do about it? And we get to work on the problems rather than to feel like potentially we are the problems. And maybe we still are the problems, but
Some
at
of us
least we
are.
have the same data to look at. And
Yeah.
that's, when there are items like my manager makes me feel my job is important.
Yeah.
We haven't covered that foundational item. Even if I do have clear expectations, the energy around getting that work done is muted because I don't know how it connects to the bigger picture.
Right.
And so some of these assessment items can really help us start knowing where to dig in terms of underutilized strengths.
Yeah. Yeah, because we think about the reality that I do this for a living. I talk about strengths, you know, all the time, every day, different organizations, different people, and still I'm surprised inside of my own company. I'm still surprised when I find hidden gems, things that I didn't know that someone could do, or they raise their hand, oh, I can help with that, and then they just absolutely impressed with high level of ability and experience. And so it's a wonderful discovery process to learn. And when team members get to own outcomes and they really get to feel like they're making a difference, they will want to do that again because there's a fulfillment, there's a satisfaction. I'm going home feeling good about myself, and everybody in my life shares that with me. They share the way that I'm going to engage and interact as compared to when I don't feel valued and I'm not making my best contribution. And that's what I get to go home with. And that's a very different exchange in our personal life. And it's the boomerang effect. However I send you home is how you're coming back to me. And if I was an employer, if I get this idea that the more wins you have, the more wins we have. And that's where underutilizing strengths, you start to get less wins. And you start to realize that you're repeating processes that probably won't land you where you want to be. Most likely will end with some kind of separation at some point. You're right back here. And so, as we both know, when you can just, you know, stem the tide of turnover, when you can stem the tide of bad performance or employee issues. When you reduce workplace friction, reduce workplace incidents, that's a big deal. That's a big shift.
It is. And one of my questions about this was when we think about this topic, how often do you see it as a hiring issue, a leadership issue versus a design issue?
Yeah,
Because it's all three, right? There are
yeah,
usually some interplay of all three.
yeah.
Where do you see those intervention points or success stories when we separate out leadership issue, hiring issues, and then design? I've got
Oh,
one in
so
mind, and
yeah,
I want to hear your input too.
I gotta start with probably the higher issue that affects the leadership issue. So when someone is put into a place of people leadership and they're the wrong fit, that is the greatest issue, hands down, in every single organization we walk into. Wrong seat for the person who's being asked to lead people. And it's not for a lack of goodwill and it's not for a lack of a good intention because often it comes with more money, more prestige, more opportunity, elevated title. But once a person is in that role and now they're being asked to do what they do through others, that is an entirely different skill set from what probably got them into that role. And I have watched that over. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You know it's coming. You know those cars are going to all collapse on each other because in our work we do a ton of leadership training, and we really try to give people managers an off ramp. We really do. We're very particular about this because we know that if you're in the wrong seat as a people leader, you are for sure suffering. You're for sure because of the retaliation alone that your people give you in all kinds of forms, right? Passive aggressive behavior, work not done at a full level, out and out defiance, out and out just not showing up, really poor attendance issues. So you're feeling it. And so when we walk through this idea that you might be an amazing individual contributor. You're a specialist. You're super talented. We get some going, I don't think I should be in this job. And when you give
Yes.
them permission to go, that's okay.
Okay.
It's okay. Like what do you fit best in? Because you were probably happier. You were probably better. You probably did more with it. And so that's where I think the wrong hire that affects leadership is probably the most systemic challenge we run into. And that's cross-sectional to every industry.
Yes, it is. And it's also devastating as you go down the food chain because you are near zero chance that you'll be more engaged than your manager. So it all flows downhill. And
It's
if
a
I'm not
very
engaged as a
rare
leader,
person. Very rare will you find that person that's going to exceed the manager's engagement.
and even then, they try and they try and they keep hitting this wall because there's a frustration that's coming downhill. And so when we can't fix that, so those off ramps are so critical to
Yeah,
keep checking in, especially in that transition from individual contributor to manager,
yeah,
that we get that right. Because if it drains you, we have a huge problem, especially if we're now losing a good contributor. You talked about earlier in the discussion about how we invest a lot in people to get them onboarded to the organization, our
yeah.
processes, our systems, whoever we're serving, internal and external customers, and to take that out and lose that and have that person worse off doesn't benefit anyone.
Doesn't feel
Um,
good either. It's
no.
such a letdown, right? I don't know how many times you've had the conversation with so and so's leaving. Oh no. Yeah, they got a better offer. Yeah, they got and then you've probably done exit interviews. I've done my fair share. And it's okay, so on conditions of confidentiality. And so often it's that people leader, lack of opportunity, feeling suppressed, feeling like I'm not being understood, and to the point of the conversation, underutilized value. I am not being leveraged for what I can bring here.
And I think too, I want to go back to we haven't talked about the design issue, but I think about this so often my brain goes home. So you talked about the boomerang effect and whatever I send you with, I'm going to get back the next day. But in the meantime, there are families in the mix. There are individual health and well-being. And if I go home and I'm empty, I've given everything I've got. I'm frustrated. I'm tired. How much time am I going to spend with my kids playing on the floor, playing Legos? How much time am I going to devote to making a nutritious dinner for my family? I don't have a lot of gas in the tank left for that. And that just crushes our communities when we have people. And then think about that spousal interaction. I'm sure you've been in an interaction where either you or your spouse was not doing well at work, and that has an effect on your marriage, and it has an effect on how that other person sees the organization you work for and feels about it. So then you're getting pushback from a spouse to either get a different job, talk, address some conflict at work, and it just keeps spinning
Yeah,
in these interactions, and it can just drain people.
it really does. I think you're giving such a, I love the vivid imagery because when we think about the quality of life standpoint that work is meant to support, and what really makes a life, what really gives us intrinsic value, feeling worth, feeling a sense of purpose. Work is part of that for all of us. All of us who work is a part of our purpose. It's a part of meaning in life. And so when work is taking away from what becomes our legacy of life, which is our family, our friends, our community, our philanthropy, now there's this pull. And there are a few that can compartmentalize, very few compartmentalize work for what it is. It's a paycheck, and then my life is here. This is where, and I've met them. We've all met them. They're amazing. They still get out in the community and coach or contribute or volunteer or do stuff at church, do stuff in, like they
And
do
yet
that.
they are the poster children for underutilized strengths because they do all
Oh,
this in their community and they're underutilized at work, but they're tolerating it because they don't see another clear path,
mhm.
is usually what I see. And it just, I hate, one of my core values is I hate waste. I hate wasted time, energy,
Yeah.
money, talent, enthusiasm. I hate waste. And that's a beautiful picture of this person who does all this stuff in their personal life, and at work, it's just enough.
And they very likely have such high resilient persevering strengths that that's going to be who they are no matter where they're put. So you
Yes.
said you said those incredible humans over here, and then you go to the big pot of most of us and how I think it was a recent stat, 80% of our decisions are emotion driven. We're very emotional, and so how can we not be? So when we're led by negative feelings and emotions, it's coming out everywhere. And now we're short fused and we're frustrated and we're conflicting in every environment. Well, that's rough. That's rough. And usually conflicted people find conflict online and in unhealthy spaces,
Yes.
discourse with whoever disagrees with them. And so there's this just edge and this space. Well, living in that space is unhealthy. So coming back to underutilized, oh my, like if you thought of all of the passion and all of the energy and all of the force that people can bring in this life, and you as an employer, you have all of these resources here, it is in your best interest. It is wise. It is discerning. It is smart business. Figure out who you have. Figure out who you have, what you have, and try to make it work for you.
So I actually think that leads us beautifully into the design process because in addition to like organizational design, right, there are some big things we can do with the structure of our organizations to draw out talents. But
Hmm.
I often try to think in the context of the situations we already have rather than a full reorg. What can we do within our own individual teams?
Yeah.
And they're so often, I had one named Kevin, who's one of my dear friends. He was in our wedding, wonderful human being. He worked for my husband, then worked for me, and then went on to his own entrepreneurial adventure. And we called him Chicken Little because he was very analytical, saw all the problems, not as much in a negative way, but when you are on the other side of those, it feels negative because he feels like
Hmm.
he's telling you every idea is a bad idea. And so, from a design perspective, we kind of flipped the script and made him be upfront in our idea generation processes. And so, we
Hmm.
would bring Kevin drafts and we'd say, okay, we have this idea. Here's how it's going to work. What do you think? And he'd say, oh, these are the 17 problems with this idea and how it's going to affect our customers and how it's going to be difficult to execute, etc. The problem was he wasn't wrong. And so, we'd take this gift that he's giving us with his analytical nature. We'd go fix a bunch of the problems. We'd come back with draft number two. We'd say, Kevin, here's the second draft. What do you think? And he'd go, well, here's the three remaining problems I really see. Okay, good point. We'd really rather not roll it out without dealing with those. Okay, so we go fix them and come back. And the last round, he'd always say, well, I just don't like these two things. And we'd say, okay, we can live with that. And we'd move forward. But it went from this Kevin poops on every idea to Kevin makes every idea better by still being Kevin. We just designed him into a different part of the process. And it
Mm,
was magic. He felt valued. We got better. It was utilization, right, at its finest. And
mhm.
so I think about so often we see people's talents through the lens of how they irritate us without ever thinking about flipping the script to how could we use that to everyone's benefit?
Yeah.
Is
When
there
we
who
think
they're
about
going to.
intentional design around a culture that really cultivates the best from each individual, we want the highest, best use of each person's individual contribution, and we want diversity of perspective. So we want to know that there's a lot of different ways to look at a scenario, and some of a culture's natural way of being is its majority rule. So majority starts to determine think and flow, and so outliers are treated that way. Well, when by design we embrace outlier perspectives, we want contrarian opinions. We need Kevin on the team. We want to have that way of doing things where we're broader minded, we're open to other opinions, perspectives. You are exactly correct. If that is not designed in, that will not be how it goes because culture is simply norms, repeated norms. That's all it is. And they're often by we like to say that you could design those norms, so it's intentional, or you cannot design them, then it's incidental. It's going to happen. You're going to have norms. Steward it carefully. Be careful what you allow to become your norms because that becomes your culture.
And I think this is a really important point to make in terms of what norms we want and the outliers, treating them like outliers versus really embracing that. Even something simple with every at some point at every meeting we ask, what are we missing? And open the door to actually wholeheartedly wonder, what are we missing here? And my husband is notorious with his strategic futuristic engineer process brain to tell me I'm working on entirely the wrong thing. With my little activator command girl, I'm on a path. And he has this broader viewfinder and we'll say, well, what about this other thing you haven't even considered? And it's when it's timed well, it's really magical. When it's two-thirds of the way my way down the process, it's just really irritating. And so like the what am I missing question I love. It's it just helps us prime for a different point of view because we all see the world through the different set of lenses, which is
Very
what this
practical.
strengths language is about.
Yeah,
So
I like what when you're talking about the things built in intentional that do allow for underutilized strengths to have their moment in the sun. How do we build that? And that takes very intentional people leadership training. Because when we're measured on what the throughput is, whatever that equals, whatever success equals, we get caught in that tunnel vision. We have to get X done by Y, and report to Z. Like we have this formula that works. It's part of how the organization is built. It's what we're used to. So when we disrupt flow by intentional design to bring in other perspectives, it always has to lead to an improvement, right? It's a better outcome. And I think that's sometimes the risk. I think that's sometimes the risk in the design is time. That's often what I hear most as the pushback. It's time. Do we have time? And I would, and maybe you would agree, if you don't give the time, you're going to spend it later. You're going to spend it with the turnover. You're going to spend it with the disengagement. You're going to spend it anyway. Why not spend it being intentional of how you leverage it now?
we don't have the time to do it right now, but we're going to end up doing it twice.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Or
My other
more.
favorite, yeah, exactly. My other favorite one about time is there's never a good, but never a good time to get better. We're
Yeah.
always busy being busy. And so we just have to get better now. We have to get better next week. We have to force it into our schedules so that it happens. I even have managers who put recognition on their calendar. On Tuesdays at noon, I go around and say nice things to people. But it's one of those rhythms that it's not natural to them. They have to work at it, But when they see so if we go back to the survey space, the recognition I receive is perfect for me,
Yeah.
and they're not complementary by nature, then they have to start working at it. And there are good processes we can help them if their heart is in the right place
Hmm.
and their desire. So I have another question I want us to ponder. The difference between somebody being good at their job and actually working in their strengths. I think you alluded to this a little bit when we were talking about the dichotomy of somebody who can be meh at work and awesome in the community.
Sure.
But, I think Marcus Buckingham actually talks a lot about when we can do something well versus when it brings us a lot of joy, energy, and success. They're not always in the same mix. So, what do you see among clients, among the broader workforce, in your own heart?
Yeah.
What
It's funny that someone can be great at an aspect of their job and they seemingly thrive in it. And then through just human growth, development, they're bored. They're ready for the next challenge because it's no longer stimulating growth. They've lost the resistance part of it. And so as a person, we're naturally inclined to want to grow, develop, exceed expectations, continue to move forward. And so there is a risk of having someone who's really good at something they're really good at continue in it beyond its lifespan, because it's very possible that what was clearly a developed area of strength, a developed area where now these skills, knowledge, experience, education, my own natural talents, ooh, I'm a rock star here. Well, okay, but that might be for that time in space that they were in that realm, and now giving room for what's next, what's level two, because leveling up is also an equally valuable part of engagement, that I get to keep leveling up and keep growing, because otherwise, what used to be my number one starts to feel a lot less like that. It starts to feel like, yeah, I could do it. I'm good at it, but it doesn't mean it's going to hold the same weight for me. And so there is a caution there. Sometimes we need to keep you doing that because you are the one that does it, and so there might have to be time to dedicate, and that's okay. That's reasonable, I find, and perhaps you see this as well. As long as there's vision, right? As long as there's vision for what's next, as long as there's the expectation of better growth, opportunity, I find that across almost every industry we talk with, you're going to hear something in that space.
I do think if we go back to underutilized strengths and strengths in general, most leadership team members tend to think most people get bored, most people want to continue to learn and grow. And what I see sometimes is there are talent sets who really their joy comes from continually deepening their expertise and specialization. It comes from routine and owning that routine in a beautiful way. You think accounting and the joy of closing the books and reconciling and making sure everything balances. You know, way often leadership teams who value a lot more variety and speed tend to underappreciate the people who are steady, consistent, patient, and very, very deep experts. And I think we have to acknowledge there are some talent sets that really do thrive for very long periods in one set of skills, experience, and maybe keep leveling up. It's the individual contributor path versus the leadership path, right? And valuing both of those for what they bring to the table is something I see leaders continually under appreciating.
Yeah, my son is in the electrical field. And, when he made the decision to shift his full course study career into the electrical field, he was good at his job. He was good. He was a good electrician, and he was making his way up and finding more opportunity, more authority. But where he was really intrigued and what he ended up doing today is he's a good people leader. And so when it was identified that there was this chance for him to take a different role within a different organization, what I sometimes have thought about is, wow, his previous employer missed a really good opportunity to take this person that they had trained, they had brought up, they brought him through the ranks, and they lost him because they didn't realize great at the trade aspires to lead people. Like, it was in him to do that. So now he's in a role that challenges him like no other. But he's thriving under that. He
Yeah.
enjoys the learning. He likes the intrigue of it. He's finding a lot of value, and it's fantastic to watch. And so I think recognizing, as we both know, people will grow and change and develop and interest move. And there's nothing wrong with the person who you might be thinking about, but they're our A player. Like we need them there. Great. Keep new trainings, new opportunities, give them room for growth. They may stay and thrive for you, but then be open to where the change can take people.
It seems like your son is a really great poster child for ask the question. Hey, do you have any interest in this path? Do you ever think you would? And little growth opportunities without changing a role to say, well, why don't you manage this team? Why don't you manage this project? And I don't think we as leaders are curious enough about the aspiration of our team members to say, okay, are you on a generalist path or a specialist path? Do you ever aspire to manage people or not? How can I keep removing barriers to the path that you want to travel? Because that's my job as a manager.
That's
That's
right.
it.
Especially with the creativity, right? Because we can get caught in a tunnel vision of, well, there's just nowhere to go. There's nowhere to lead. There's nowhere to move you. So we're going to keep you where you are. Well, that's you can set the clock. That's probably a countdown to some kind of departure. And this was like pre-30, right? So this is a person who early career, growing, very likely going to make transitions. And it's okay if that's you're comfortable with people moving on to, different areas of growth development for the career. But it's important to ask ourselves that question with a Kevin in the room. What are we not missing? Or what are we missing? What are we not seeing of where we want to create space, where we want to give opportunity? And it's fascinating because in this case study, the company was national. I mean, it was huge. So there was mobility. It was just out of sight, out of mind. We're siloed, we're focused, we're there. And we probably both see that is commonly by design. You're commonly working in what you know, how you get it done, where you accomplish. You've given space for some kind of turnover that you've accepted. You've given space for some kind of disengagement that you've accepted. And perhaps our challenge is, well, if you're leaving underutilized talent and strengths here, you're paying twice, maybe more for what you're doing.
You are. And the cost is going beyond the doors of your organization, whether those are virtual or physical. And so let's talk about scope of this problem. Are there a lot of people sitting on unutilized strengths? Is it a small portion of the population? What's your take on the size and scope of this issue?
Sadly, I think it's the majority. I think it's 80% of our workforce, or 70 to 80%, I would say. If I go global, it's 80, because I think we have a two stem issue. So one is we're not really trained, educated, brought up with the idea to know ourselves in such a way to communicate well what we do best, where we thrive, what we bring, the full complement of who we are. And then the second is I don't think organizationally, in many industries, I won't speak for all, but in many that we've spent time in, it's just not the same priority. It's not the same practice. It's not emphasized. And so I think we end up with a dual issue here that feeds. So if an organization has high engagement, 35%, 40%, that would be high when we think global ranking. Um, I always love to ask leaders, what about the other 60 or 70%? What are we not realizing over there that, when the disengaged are really not engaged, like exceptionally just like troublemaker side,
Yes.
what is it that it's costing? What are we not realizing? And that I think it's systemic.
I think about it like a rowboat, right? You've got in your example, say four people, 40% of the people in the rowboat rowing in the same direction in lockstep. You've got about half, from what I'm seeing in the data right now, that are asleep in the rowboat, and you've got the remaining 10-ish% who are dragging their oars in the water, trying to throw us off course, whacking the people who are actually rowing with their oars, and that costs us so much money,
So
time,
so
effort.
frustrating. It's
And
it's so frustrating. Like, I'd rather have you just sit there. Why are you fighting us? What is the point? And it's so demoralizing, right? When you're a people leader with someone that is incorrigible. And now it's, well, now what do I do? Now how do I approach this? It's
nearly
so,
all
so
my clients have someone on their staff I call just the resistor.
yeah.
They're just resistant to everything. And I think one of our issues is as a society, we are absolutely terrible at giving and receiving meaningful compliments, which then often lead people to clues about their talents. I was lucky enough, I was in my undergrad at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and I had a professor in a business plan class say, "This is one of the best business plans I've ever seen. You need to go do this." And it was
Mhm.
a line of meat marinades for wild game that I had pitched to the class. And I was like, "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I'm graduating, I have a job." And he's like, "That's all right, just go do it anyway." And so, regardless of the fact that I'm not actually interested in hunting or cooking, I started a business around a line of wild game meat marinades and realized I love entrepreneurship. And it sent me down this path because of one little compliment.
That's cool.
Mostly we get compliments and we reject them. We're like, no, no,
Mhm.
no, everybody does that. Well, we know in strengths language, not everybody does that. They're
Mhm.
special. That's why you're receiving a compliment. So I think if we could do a better job receiving those as the gifts they are and getting a lot better at giving those gifts, specific, timely feedback to people that they could accept, we would be better faster, all of
Oh
us.
my. I mean, when you think about that comment, and I'm looking at the plant behind you, and we think if people like a plant, and some of us, I like to call them the orchids among us. They're very sensitive, and they really, really do need extra attention. They need their little, they got to be, they have to feel like they're being looked after. And then you have the cactus people who they go a long time. They're very hardy, but they do need something, and it really has to matter because they may go a long time without it. So when it comes, it needs to matter for them. And as a leader, you got to know who's on your team. You got to know who are your little, who are your little wildflowers, who are your people that they just without judgment, right? Because some people just need more feedback. They need more compliments. They need to know they're rowing in the right. They need to know, good job, keep it up. You're doing great. Look at the impact you're
Yes.
making. And others are over here just going and they're like, good job. They're like, I know. Like, so they actually every now and then just make sure they know just every now and then. But it's such a key part back to why it helps to have the ability to know who's who and what's what, and that shout out to talk to your people. Get to know who's who so that we're not leaving things out there. We're not paying for things multiple times. We really are doing what it is we're here to do for the company's or organization's mission.
And actually, that brings it back so nicely to where we started, right? Know your people. There's no shortcut. You can't fake it. And I will say there's no shortcut, but all these assessments are meant to give us a shortcut. For those of us who are not massively empathetic and individualizing in our approach, if we can get a quick report that gives us some clues of where to start digging for those underutilized talents, the faster and more efficient we can be in meeting that mark. And I've
That's right.
seen leaders resist the need to have any of that data. I'm like, fine, go it alone, but it's going to take longer and a lot more time investment to really see them and help shine the light. And so that's, I think, why I've loved this path for the last 20 years is
Yeah.
give me some clues. Managers don't want to suck at work either. They want some clues to how to be better and how to connect. And that's, I think, a huge part of what you and I do with our clients is
Yeah.
here's some clues on engagement. Here's some clues on talent. Here's some potential right people for the seat. See if you like them.
That's
Okay.
right.
So where do we go from here? What do you want to make sure as people think about dredging up and bringing into light their team's talents in a more intentional way? If this really is a systemic issue across the world, give us a couple of takeaway to-dos
Sure.
that would really help.
I love to challenge my friends who are people leaders to think about what sort of investment you're making into yourself and to other people leaders. So if you live in the executive space, What does that look like from an investment into your people to really develop them to be the best leader they can be? Because that's often a gap that we've identified. I spent 6 years speaking for the same organization you speak for, in rooms of CEOs, and just found that the investment into people leader development really lacks. It's a lack. It's an almost, I don't even know where to start. It wasn't done for me. I don't even know where to begin. And yet that investment, that yield on that investment is massive. It can really advance the org. It's a powerful ROI. So I usually start there. Evaluate, are we developing our people to build a really healthy, thriving culture where we're not leaving things where they should? And then secondly, for individual contributors listening, at whatever level you live in your org, you have to self-advocate. If you don't self-advocate and it goes unsaid and it's a mystery, if it's a mystery to them, it remains. It's not enough to trust they'll see it because people are busy and we're tunneled on what we have to do. So get good at telling your story. Here's what I do here. Here's what I do there. And that's an important part of coaching, is learning how to tell your story, how to do it well in the interview, but do it well on the job. And I think that's a gap often in individual development, is how to keep that narrative moving so that you can flourish at work and you have some ownership of that part of your life of, I want to be engaged. I need to participate in that process.
And what I hear you saying there is one of the things that has always resonated with me is it's not enough to just, if say I'm an individual contributor, it's not enough to just get the information. I have to internalize it, whether I take an assessment online or, get a Gallup Strengths Finder book. It's not enough to just take the assessment, read the report, and move on. It's something that I have all those assessments on my calendar every January, and I go back through them and I remember, oh, that's right. That's why this is happening in my life. That's why I'm having these frustrations. And we all need to get better at doing that. And
Mhm.
then, as you were saying, the first one around the investment we make in people, the all the thing I could hear in my head from the people sitting in those seats, those CEOs that we speak to, is their first reaction is, I pay them to show up every day. Of course, I'm making an investment in them, but I think they think that it's just trading days for dollars, and they forget about the investment to level up, because so often I see we spend a lot of energy on our C players and not near enough on our A players. And our A
Yep.
players is where all the gains come from. C players are often a distraction. They're in the wrong seat, maybe in the wrong organization too. And so they're getting a lot of the attention, and the A players are often cactuses who are just doing the thing day after day and not getting enough love. So, like you were saying, make it matter, make
Yeah.
it more frequent.
Yeah.
And those are, I think, two things we can absolutely do.
Agreed.
So, this has been great. I think we are almost out of our time. These topics, it's amazing to me. It isn't just paid employees. This reflects the needs of our volunteers as well. The unpaid
Mhm.
workforce, I work with like a bunch of fairs and education, and there's a lot of volunteerism in these spaces. And
Mhm.
they have the same needs. I have this quote that I love. There's a entrepreneur named Graham Weston, and his quote is that we all want to be valued members of a winning team on an inspiring mission. And if we
Mhm.
can meet those
Here,
needs,
here.
have done something wonderful for the individual, the team, whoever we're serving. And I'm so grateful that you're on the same journey, and I'm looking forward to our partnership. Thank you for your time today. And thanks to all your team at 34 Strong, because they're out there doing some great work.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mel.
Bye, y'all. Hope you'll join us again for You've Got People Problems. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of You've Got People Problems. If you got something out of the conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with the other leaders in your network, because let's face it, we all have people problems. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast app. But either way, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.